Hi there.
Caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome. This is Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, radio and online. Today we'll be discussing the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer QC. Has he lost control of his party? On Friday it was announced that he breached the MP's code of conduct 8 times. And the Premier League is back, so we'll be getting all of the latest from the first weekend of action. The political commentator Reem Ibrahim joins me throughout the show. But first, here's the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Darren. 1 minute past 2. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The family of Archie Battersby are calling for an inquiry following his death, saying no parent or family must go through this again. The 12-year-old died on Saturday in the Royal London Hospital after weeks of legal battles. Archie had been in a coma since he was found unconscious by his mother at home in April. In a statement, the family say they'd had to fight for Archie's right to live with everything stacked against them. Barts Health NHS Trust has issued a statement saying medical staff provided high-quality care to Archie with extraordinary compassion. Rishi Sunak has criticised his leadership rival Liz Truss, describing her planned tax cuts as starry-eyed boosterism compared to his own clear-eyed realism. Speaking in The Times, the former Chancellor said putting more borrowed money into the economy risks making inflation worse. Ms Truss says she'd use an emergency budget in September to immediately cut taxes. She's also pledging to bring forward plans to scrap the national insurance hike by 6 months. Former leadership hopeful Penny Mordaunt told us Liz Truss is ready to take the reins.
I think she really wants to ensure she's ready to hit the ground running, to have that emergency budget, to alleviate some of the cost of living issues that people are facing, but also to create that modern economic framework that we need to really fire up our economy and get things going again. That's what people want to see, and that's why I've chosen her. I've got a lot of respect for Rishi, but I think that she really understands what the nation needs now.
Well, that's the view of Penny Mordaunt. Tory MP and former Education Secretary Damien Hinds supports Rishi Sunak. He told GB News he'll introduce more economic support if needed.
He has been clear that that more help may be needed and can be forthcoming. And it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong to put out of the question. This is about a unique situation that we find ourselves in. Combination of COVID and Putin's aggression in Ukraine, and people are finding it extremely difficult to deal with that.
More than 1,700 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this week. That's more than half the number rescued in the whole of August last year. Yesterday, 337 people made the journey from France in 10 small boats. Over 18,000 people have now made the crossing this year, the latest Ministry of Defence figures show. Border Force officials brought the vast majority to shore in Dover. However, many were taken to the port of Ramsgate due to concerns about congestion. Detectives are urging the public to provide any information they may have about the disappearance of missing student nurse Owami Davies. She was last seen in the early hours of the 7th of July as she walked along Derby Road in West Croydon. 5 people have now been arrested, 2 on suspicion of murder, 3 on suspicion of kidnap. 4 of the suspects have been released on bail. The Met's Specialist Crime Command says officers are working tirelessly to follow every line of inquiry. An 11-year-old girl has died after going missing at a water park in Windsor. Members of the public joined emergency services in the search at Liquid Leisure yesterday afternoon before she was rushed to Wexham Park Hospital. Her death is being treated as unexplained. An investigation is underway. Egyptian mediators have suggested a truce in Gaza that would start from this evening as violence within the Strip entered its 3rd day. It's thought Israel has already agreed to the ceasefire, but negotiators were still awaiting a response from the Palestinians. The region has seen shelling from both sides in recent days following a strike by Israeli forces on Friday against jihadist militants. President Zelensky has called for a stronger international response to what he's described as Russia's nuclear terror. It's after Putin's forces shelled the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the biggest in Europe. During a phone call with the European Council President, Zelensky called for sanctions to be imposed on Russia's nuclear industry. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up on the show today. It's been a tough week for Sir Keir Starmer. It's been found that he breached the MP's code of conduct 8 times, and he's under growing pressure to make his stance clear on MPs appearing on picket lines. Is his position becoming untenable? Sales figures from the House of Commons show Boris Johnson's collectible Toby jug has far outsold Margaret Thatcher's and Winston Churchill's. Does this show that he's still got that star power? And we'll be speaking to Sir John Redwood to get his take on several areas in the UK being subjected to a hosepipe ban and what he thinks could actually be done. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. As ever, your thoughts are much more important than my own. What do you make of Sir Keir Starmer? Do you think he's losing control of his party? Tweet me at GBNews or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online on YouTube and don't forget Facebook. Loads of cracking content on our page. Cheers very much. Before all of that though, I want to ask you, how often have you heard somebody making a case for border controls and managed migration, then being howled down as some kind of swivel-eyed bigot, a racist, a heartless swine? The list goes on. The British have repeatedly voted for robust border controls, the kind of checks and balances that apply to most nation-states worldwide, whose borders aren't leaky like a sieve like ours is. Time and again we were told that we couldn't have border controls because we were a member of the EU. Well, we voted for Brexit. We voted to take back control and bring an end to this idea that Britain could handle unsustainable levels coming here. Unsustainable numbers at a time when we've got a cost of living crisis, a housing crisis, an NHS crisis, a school places crisis, a dentist crisis. The list goes on and on and on. We've also seen the continued security threat, that is the English Channel crisis. And according to figures from the Ministry of Defence, the number of people who have illegally crossed the Channel this year has passed 18,000. 1,709 people have been brought to the UK so far in August alone. We'll see a smashing of the number of arrivals recorded last year. And the argument goes, right, that these people are scrambling for the dinghies to escape war and persecution. And that they could be LGBT foreigners from nations where being gay could see you harassed or worse. So how could we possibly oppose their arrival. How could we, heartless hicks, oppose the arrival of those escaping the bullet and the bomb? That's the argument that lefty lawyers and politicians use to gang up against the voters in seeking to thwart the deportation of those who have made it illegally to our shores. Only that isn't reflected in the facts. Facts revealed to us thanks to a leaked document passed to the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, who'll be on this show later. This document indicates that 40% of those arriving on our shores are from Albania, not Afghanistan. Others come from stable regimes, including Turkey, Egypt, Vietnam and India. Now, Albania isn't exactly a land of milk and honey, but it's not some war-torn hellhole. This is primarily about economic migration. It's not about somebody facing life or death and seeking refuge in a safe country. As I've said before on this channel, if it genuinely was, these people have already passed through several safe countries by the time they get here. I don't know about you, but France is a pretty nice place to go on holiday at this time of year. They come here only to be placed in taxpayer-funded hotels as everyday Britons struggle to keep the lights on. To me, that just isn't right. It doesn't sit well with me at all. And some people have reportedly left these hotels without our authorities registering their photographs or taking their fingerprints. So that's people that are coming here, coming and going as they please, that we know next to nought about. Albanian criminal gangs are among the most prominent and notorious in Britain today. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out that some people may not be coming here because they want to abide by our laws and traditions. Some may even be in danger of modern-day slavery in Britain's dark underground economy. The government had seen these documents before Tice ever did, if I hazard a guess. We weren't told about the facts, though. Why is that? Ask yourself that question. Why is it that the two leadership candidates in Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have barely said a thing about how they'd stop the invasion at our southern border? Why have other broadcasters not actually quizzed them on how they'll stop this issue? The government ought to be open and transparent with the public about who exactly is coming here and what steps they're going to take to finally end the cruel trade of people and this assault on our generosity and goodwill as a nation. Now, despite leading in most opinion polls, as I said at the top of the hour there, it's once again been a week to not to forget a week rather, with Sir Keir Starmer. He has had one hell of a tough ride, I think it's safe to say. The roller coaster never ends for Sir Keir. As well as showing a lack of consistency by not sacking his shadow levelling up secretary Lisa Nandy, she appeared alongside striking workers, which is something he did sack Shadow Minister former Shadow Minister, I should say, Sam Tarry for. The Labour leader was also found to have breached the MP's code of conduct 8 times. Not once, not twice, 8 times by failing to register 8 interests on time. So, joining me to discuss this is the former Labour spin doctor, Joe Phillips, and political editor of the Daily Express, David Maddox. Joe, can I start with you, please? Does Sir Keir Starmer need to clarify his stance? Because right now, many of my viewers are saying, well, Darren, it seems really inconsistent, the approach he's applying as far as his shadow cabinet's concerned and what his stance is on people who strike.
Darren, first of all, I must correct you. I'm not a former Labour spin doctor. I actually was Paddy Ashdown's press secretary, but I'm more than happy to talk about Keir Starmer. But just for
I do apologise.
Sake,
yes,
there will
absolutely.
be people in the Labour Party thinking, I don't remember her. I mean, you're right. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party should be absolutely zooming ahead in the polls at the moment. The Tories are tearing themselves apart. It's a zombie government, and he's not getting through. And things like the sacking of Sam Tarry, they are self-inflicted injuries, if you like, that create a problem where one didn't need to exist. He didn't sack Sam Tarry, the former Shadow Transport Minister, for going on a picket line. He sacked him for making up policy on the hoof by doing unauthorised interviews. Now, that is, fairly standard behaviour within a shadow cabinet, within a political party. Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, did appear on a picket line, but she wasn't doing interviews that were not out of kilter with the party's policy. So I think that's important to get that clear. I think the problem with Keir Starmer is that he is, he's now got an open goal, really. We've got a cost of living crisis. We know that is the single biggest issue facing most people. He needs to come up with some really clear policies and some really detailed stuff about what Labour would do if they were in government. I fear he is being run by focus groups, and I think that means there's a lot of caution about saying something that might upset somebody. And as we all know in politics, you can't please all of the people all of the time. But it's a fool who tries to do that, because you're just going to make people think you're weak and haven't got a policy.
Yes, Joe Phillips, thank you very much there. David Maddox, I'm going to bring you in now. What's your instinct on how Sir Keir Starmer's actually going down with the public? Because Joe's right, surely, at this time of generation-defining inflation, people are really struggling right now. The Labour Party should be falling over each other, scrambling up the polls, shouldn't they?
Well, I just compare it back to the 1990s, when we had a collapsing Conservative government, riddled with sleaze and all the rest of it. And Labour under Tony Blair had leads of 20 plus points in the polls. I mean, the hard truth of this is that the reason the Conservatives are even still in the contest and have a more than fighting chance of winning the next election is because Keir Starmer is leader of the Labour Party. And just doesn't inspire people. I mean, he's often described as dull. He is. And, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago suggesting actually that maybe we've got the wrong leadership election, because it's quite clear that Labour members and Labour MPs are unhappy with Starmer as leader. I mean, the Sam Tarry incident was pretty clear on that. And certainly the amount of support that Sam Tarry had after his sacking was remarkable. Whereas, with Boris Johnson, we've got a kind of revolution on our hands in the Conservative Party of members furious that he's been kicked out by MPs. So, it's a really tough one. And now we found out this week, of course, that Keir Starmer can't even run his own office, let alone a political party or the country. And it's just astonishing, actually.
The coverage of that as well, I found quite extraordinary, because I don't know about you, David, but I would put money on it, and I'm not a betting man, I tell you that. I would put money on it that were it Boris Johnson that had been found to have breached these rules on accounting and all the rest of it, it would be headline news. You wouldn't hear the end of it. It would have been all weekend we were talking about that.
I think there's a huge difference, Darren. I'm sorry to butt in there, but
that's all right.
Boris Johnson is a serial liar, and known to be a liar long before he came into politics. He was sacked from jobs as a journalist, as David and we both know. I think there's a huge difference, and many of these things. I mean, the Commission said these were minor or inadvertent contraventions of the code, and one of them was a declaration which was a day late.
But David, there were 8. There were 8.
This is a man who forgot that he owned 7 acres of land and didn't declare it. I mean, the fact is that the rule of law in this country, it's the basis of our democracy. The rule of law suggests that everything applies equally to everybody. And I'm afraid, with this and with Beergate, you just look at it and you just think, it's not being applied equally at all, and Starmer is getting off much more lightly than a Conservative MP, let alone Boris Johnson. I mean, you're absolutely right, Darren, if it had been Boris Johnson, would have been demands for judge-led inquiries and all the rest of it. It's just amazing. And the fact that this was not referred to the Standards Committee for 8 breaches, I mean, this is not one breach, this is 8 breaches. It was not referred to the Standards Committee, I think it's a scandal. And let's go back to Beergate. Beergate compared to Partygate. So Boris and Rishi were actually fined for something that they had been honest about, that they'd publicised, that this cake had happened before a meeting in a workplace, whereas Labour Party actually lied about the event in Durham, which was a much bigger event, pre-planned, and yet, it's the former who get fined and not Starmer and Rayner and the rest of them. I mean, it's bizarre. The whole thing is bizarre.
I know that you disagree with that last point, but I wonder, do you agree with me? You mentioned your former job in advising or working with Paddy Ashdown. I'm wondering, when you think back to that era of politician, right, the likes of Paddy Ashdown, very charismatic man, and you look at the crop of politicians that we've got now. We're facing, it's either going to be Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss as leader of the Conservative Party, and you've got Robo Starmer as leader of Labour. What happened to politics and politicians to go from the likes of Paddy Ashdown to this?
I agree with you, Darren, and I don't think that's, me being old and, the rose-tinted spectacles. I think, we are in an era now of professional politicians, and if you go back 20, 30, 40, 50 years, most people who came into politics had done something else beforehand. They hadn't just worked for their local party, become a special advisor and then become an MP. And certainly somebody like Paddy Ashdown, he had a career in the Special Boat Service and had been unemployed and had done many, many things. And I think if you look at the calibre of people then, and I would include John Major in that. And I mean, Paddy always used to say that John Major was the most decent person that had ever been in Downing Street. And I think that probably still holds true today. It's difficult. Politics is hard graft. It's brutal. We spend our lives, the three of us here, dissecting people's every move, every comment. It's brutal in terms of time and commitment and the effect it has on your family life. So I think the people who are being attracted to go into politics, certainly at national level, they're having to make a bigger decision and be aware of the sacrifices that they have to make. I mean, I genuinely believe that most people go into politics for the right reasons because, there are a lot easier ways to line your pocket or get famous. So I do think politics is done with the best intentions, and I'm sure David would agree with me. And, across the country, there are councillors, whether it's parish, county or local level, who are really working hard on behalf of local people. So I think we have to be, all of us, we have to be mindful that we don't tar all politicians with the same brush, because the worst thing that can happen is when we come to the next election, people shrug their shoulders and say, oh, they're all the same, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah, indeed, because I tell you what, you hear that time and time again. David Maddox, in a word, do you reckon Sir Keir Starmer's going to romp home at the next general election?
No, actually, I think he'll lose.
Well, there we are.
If it's Rishi or Liz Truss, either of them can beat him.
Joe, if you look into your crystal ball, what do you reckon?
If I was in the Conservative Party, I think I'd call a snap election if I was one of the leadership campaign, because then you hand over the cost of living to the Labour Party and let them deal with it. But I think that, they will want to hang on to their own power, whichever one wins.
Well, we'll have to leave it there, but I thank you both very much for your contribution. That was the former Labour, Lib Dem even, advisor, Joe Phillips, and the political editor of The Express, David Maddox. Joining me in the studio is the political commentator, Reem Ibrahim. Reem, what do you make of Sir Keir Starmer's position here? Because it doesn't seem to know if he's coming or going, right? He should be massively ahead in the polls. The Tories are in a leadership election in which they're tearing chunks, knocking 7 bells out of each other.
Absolutely.
Why is he
first of all,
not?
thank you for having me on, Darren.
Not
it's
at
very
all.
lovely. And yeah, I think it really shows that the sort of left-wing, sort of socialist vision that Keir Starmer is attempting to push forward on the centre-right of the Labour Party just doesn't hit home with anybody. He needs to be able to win back those red wall seats that the Tories took from him in 2019. And I just don't think he'll get there. I think that he doesn't have any sort of principle or sort of vision that the party really, really needs. I think that when you look over at the Conservative Party now, you've got Liz Truss, who's ahead in the polls, and she really is showing that actually those principles, that ideology, that sort of vision that Britain actually genuinely needs, people absolutely love that.
And do you think Sir Keir Starmer actually turning around to areas like Hartlepool, you know, and saying, I'm your man, you used to vote Labour, I'm the real deal, I'm the genuine article. Do you think working class communities like that are going to turn around and say, well, I didn't like Jeremy Corbyn, but actually you're different, Sir Keir?
I don't think that Keir Starmer really represents that sort of hard working class Labour vote. I think that he is sort of the champagne socialist figure that a lot of us sort of look up. And I think that he genuinely doesn't represent what people genuinely used to vote for when they voted Labour. I think that now the Conservatives have really shown that the individual, that the free market, that business and driving forward the free market is really what people want and how people can do well in their lives.
Well, we shall see. We shall see. Reem Ibrahim, though, will be coming back to you for some more in a minute or two. Now, folks, next up, we're going to a break. There's plenty more to come, though, this afternoon. We'll be getting the rundown on this weekend's sport in action.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK will be mostly dry, although cloudiest in the north with light rain for western Scotland. Here are the details. A fine end to the day across southwest England with plenty of late evening sunshine. It will remain dry throughout this evening and tonight with temperatures only slowly falling away. Across southeast England, clear skies will persist this evening, leaving a fine and dry night, although warm with plenty of sunshine to end the weekend. A dry and fine evening across South Wales, although there may be some patchy low cloud, mist and fog tonight, particularly in the north. There'll be plenty of sunshine around to end the weekend across the Midlands. Tonight, a combination of clear spells and light winds brings a risk of some patchy mist and fog forming. Patchy cloud will persist across much of northeast England this evening, though there will be some late evening sunny spells too, remaining warm this evening and overnight with temperatures only slowly falling away. A mostly dry end to the weekend for southern Scotland with some sunny spells around. However, there may be the odd spot of light rain and drizzle over high ground. Any cloud across Northern Ireland will continue to break up this evening to allow for sunny spells. Clear spells tonight could lead to some patchy rural mist and fog forming though. A largely dry night, though warm, especially in the east. A chance of some mist and fog in the west. That's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Real Britain. Now, sports update, and here to give us the lowdown is the sports broadcaster and journalist Aidan McGee, I'm delighted to say. Aidan, first of all, there have been some pretty surprising results on the opening weekend of the Premier League season. What stood out for you?
I wouldn't, use the word surprising. Look, the games haven't finished yet. We've still got 3 more games today. But I guess Arsenal going to Crystal Palace on Friday, winning 2-0, looking quite convincing, having a year ago also had an away game on a Friday night against London opposition and being rolled over by Brentford. They didn't allow that to happen this year. They went to Crystal Palace and won 2-0. Palace are quite a fancied side this year. That's the closest we've had, really, to an upset. Bournemouth beating Villa, I suppose, yesterday. Bournemouth are newly promoted. Yeah. We'll touch on the promoted clubs in a minute, I guess. But they beat Aston Villa. One ex-Premier League manager was at the game yesterday. He said Villa was so bad, it was scary. Newcastle got off to a good start up against the Nottingham Forest team. They've not been in the Premier League for 23 years now. It was inconceivable when I was a kid that Nottingham Forest wouldn't be at the top table. Brian Clough transcended football. He transcended sport. He was on Parky interviews and all the rest of it. Everyone knew who he was. Even Muhammad Ali knew who Brian Clough was. And now there they were after yesterday, after a 23-year hiatus. They're back. But they ran into a Newcastle side, as you know, Darren, that they've been on an upward curve since the end of last season, haven't they?
Oh,
definitely. Good, solid summer.
And they've just announced that Eddie Howe's going to stay on long-term as manager.
Yes.
But I want to talk about the money spent. The transfer window's not even closed yet, Aidan, and the money spent, it could go to record sums.
Yeah, that's the general trajectory. Inflation hasn't stopped the aggregate spending going up in football over a number of years now. It operates in its own microclimate economically. It's away from commercial sensitivities. Clubs will do what they have to do to stay in the Premier League. They will load more debt on the club if that's what they have to do. That's certainly what Man United did. But yeah, we saw Raheem Sterling get 90 minutes yesterday for Chelsea. He's been at Manchester City since 2015, so a change of scenery for him. He's only 27, plenty more football in him. Erling Haaland will be playing for Manchester City today at West Ham, 4:30. Tough trip for them. Didn't look too convincing last week, did he, in the Community Shield against Chelsea? But as you say, another month to go, and we'll see. This is what happens. You get the early weeks of the season. We've got quite an early start this year, so by the time the window closes at the end of the month, we could be 4 or 5 games in. When the clubs look and think, we've only taken 2 points in the first 5 games, they start panicking. And that's suddenly the purse strings you didn't know existed. Suddenly the purse gets emptied out and you start splashing out money. The selling club knows you're desperate, and that's how you get inflation. That's why the wheel just keeps on turning and turning. We wonder where the bandwagon's going to stop. It never seems to.
No. And the Commonwealth Games then, exciting stuff happening there. Britain doing quite well.
Yeah, well, England, it's split up. So the medals table, you have Australia out in front, but it's difficult because England is separate from Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland and everything. So normally that would be aggregated into Team GB. A little bit unfair, some would argue, but maybe this is a fair representation. But yeah, England very much holding their own. They're playing against Australia in hockey, the women, this afternoon. Good chance of a medal there. Great semi-final performance against New Zealand. I want to touch on a friend of mine as well who played football he got promotion with Reading, Gillingham and Fulham back in the 90s. He played as a youngster at Tottenham with Gary Lineker and Paul Gascoigne and guys like that. I bumped into him at Bromley South Station, must have been Monday, and I thought he was just rushing off to get away from me because he wanted to get caught in a sport chat, I'm like. And he said, I'm going to Birmingham. I said, what are we going to Birmingham for? And he goes, well, my daughter's, she's 17, she's making a debut for Team England in the 3mm springboard diving. And I was like, Neil, you never told me. And so he went up there, he's been in the Athletes Village all week. He took a nice photo that we can see on the screen there for the benefit of our radio listeners. That's Neil with his daughter Evie. As I say, 17, making a debut today. That was taken this morning and sent to us. She has, I can tell you, unexpectedly qualified for the final tonight. Don't forget, it's her debut today. It's a really, really big achievement for her.
Massive.
She's seen the coverage on GB News. She's feeling 10 foot tall. I don't know if being 10 foot tall makes a difference on diving. It probably makes it difficult, doesn't it? But metaphorically anyway. So she's in action tonight at 7 o'clock.
Right.
She's in the final. I don't know if she's a medal hope, but a hell of an achievement for a 17-year-old who wasn't expected to qualify, who's gone up with her dad this week to get ready, making a debut as well, Darren. I think that's an extraordinary achievement. Who knows? Listen, I remember 2008, I was the only British journalist who'd interviewed Rebecca Adlington 3 months before she competed in Beijing. I was told she was there for the experience. I got a call from the Observer Sports Monthly saying, are you Aidan McGee from the News of the World? I went, yeah, I am. You're the only British journalist to have interviewed. And I said, who? And he said, Rebecca Adlington. I went, Rebecca Adlington? Oh, Becky Adlington. I was only told she was there for the experience.
Right.
Anyway, that was a Friday. They did an interview with her for the Sunday. I go and play five-a-side. I get back to my house on a Sunday night. I'm just about to make myself some cheese on toast. I turn the telly on, and she's standing there on the podium with a gold medal around her neck.
So it can happen. It can happen.
Let's hope it happens tonight.
Dare to dream, Aidan McGee. Dare to dream.
Good to see you, Darren.
You too, Aidan. Thank you very much. That was Aidan McGee, the sports journalist there, giving us the latest on both the Premier League and, of course, the Commonwealth Games. Now, we're going to go to a news break now, but I'll see yous after that.
Thanks, Darren. Just after 33 minutes past 2, here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The family of Archie Battersby are calling for an inquiry following his death, saying no parent or family must go through this again. The 12-year-old died on Saturday in the Royal London Hospital after weeks of legal battles. In a statement, the family said they'd had to fight for Archie's right to live with everything stacked against them. Barts Health NHS Trust has issued a statement saying medical staff had provided high-quality care with extraordinary compassion. Rishi Sunak has criticised his leadership rival Liz Truss, describing her planned tax cuts as starry-eyed boosterism compared to his own clear-eyed realism. Speaking in The Times, the former Chancellor said putting more borrowed money into the economy risks making inflation worse. Ms Truss says she'll use an emergency budget in September to immediately cut taxes and scrap the national insurance hike. The Environment Secretary is urging water companies to ban the use of hosepipes as forecasters predict dry weather for most of the UK next week. George Eustace saying some firms have rightly taken action to lessen the effects of an unusually dry August. He's encouraging others to do the same. Last week, Southern Water and South East Water imposed bans for their customers. Egyptian mediators have suggested a truce in Gaza that would start from this evening as violence within the Strip entered its third day. It's thought Israel has already agreed to the ceasefire, but negotiators are still awaiting a response from the Palestinians. The region has seen shelling from both sides in recent days following a strike by Israeli forces on Friday against jihadist militants. On TV, online and on DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Darren will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's now 2:38 and a military intelligence report has revealed that 4 in 10 Channel migrants arriving in the United Kingdom are from Albania, a country that's been at peace for 25 years, thus calling into question, folks, the argument that the UK should welcome all migrants because, of course, they're fleeing war and persecution and all of the rest of it. Well, the man who broke the story, Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK, responded to the report by saying it's not up to the British taxpayer to support migrants who are not genuinely fleeing for their lives. I'm delighted to say that Richard Tice joins me in the studio now to discuss the findings in this report. Richard, well done, first of all.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, this was a really, really shocking report. And actually, this news has actually gone all over the world because it completely disproves everything that we've all been led to believe by the government, by well-intentioned do-gooders, charities, human rights lawyers,
lefty lawyers,
Amnesty International. They've all been saying, yeah, but they're all coming from war zones, from persecution. And now we've got the proof that the government's always had, but never told us. And the shocking thing, Darren, is that they know within days where everybody's come from. And yet we haven't been told. And here we are. I mean, Albania is, yes, it's a developing country, but it's a member of NATO. It's applied to join the EU. Its economy is fast growing. Its debt and inflation figures make ours look even more woeful than they already are. And you think, hang on, I mean, people are going from Britain to Albania on holiday.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, and this is the really big question to ask. So if you're an Albanian, you can get a cheap 180-day visa to come to the UK and fly here lawfully with that visa for a few €100. You can work under the Seasonal Agricultural Worker Scheme for months and months and months here to help the British economy and to earn money. So if you can come here legally and work or visit, why would you pay a lot more money to come here illegally with the huge dangers of coming across the boats? You think, what's going on? And the question that I've got for everybody is it a coincidence that you've got, I mean, Albanian criminal gangs have taken over the cocaine and cannabis markets here. They represent the biggest percentage of foreign nationals in our prisons. Now, the vast, vast majority of Albanians are wonderful, delightful, hard-working people. But there is a really nasty, small minority who are very, very dangerous, really violent. And that's what troubles me. Are these people actually, are they foot soldiers, willing or unwilling or unknowing of these criminal gangs? Are they being trapped in modern-day slavery, coming here thinking there's a great dream, being sold a pup, and then they're trapped into criminal gangs?
Because you look at the stats, Richard, and more than half of the number in the whole of August of 2021 have come already, and we're only on August the 7th, right? The numbers are going to, by all accounts, it looks like we're having a pretty good summer, Richard, and it looks like those numbers from last year are going to be thoroughly trounced. Why do you think the government, when time and again the British people vote for stronger border controls, they voted for Brexit in part to actually take back control and ensure that we could have border controls like any functioning democracy around the world, Richard. Why is it that the government of either party, Labour or Conservative, don't seem willing and able to get a grip of this problem?
It's very simple. Even if someone like Priti Patel, who I think she genuinely wants to get on top of this problem, the truth is that she is trapped by a civil service that do not want to get on the problem. They've had this data. They probably even didn't show the Home Secretary. She's probably got no idea. So here's what's going on. They've used our military assets, which is fine. They know exactly when the boats are leaving. They know exactly where they're leaving. They're giving the intelligence to the French authorities. But in this report, it actually says they're disappointed with the lack of cooperation from the French authorities. I'm calling for three things, Darren. Firstly, we should be given this data monthly, so we know where everybody's coming from. So we're not being lied to, we're not being misled. Secondly, the military should make sure they give every essentially departure, make sure the French police know that immediately. And then thirdly, crucially, which you can do under the existing 1974 Safety of Life at Sea regulations and laws, you have what I call pick up and take back. You pick them up, you know where they've gone from, you pick them up and you take them back. The French authorities, short term, will go nuts. What it will force is it to be taken to international laws and the courts and tribunal to rule on those regulations. But at least everybody knows we're not going to be pushed around.
And Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, but there have been numerous freedom of information requests made around this issue, trying to collect the sort of data that you're talking about right now, and they have been denied. Now, it strikes me that this is either a huge failure of government and the Home Office in particular, but you don't sound like you're laying the blame at Priti Patel's door. She's been Home Secretary for 3 years, and I ask you, Richard, if she cannot do it with the will, the determination, who can?
Well, that's the thing, and who knows whether she will remain in place or whether she'll be replaced under whoever wins. I suspect it'll be Liz Truss. But you're reliant on being given the information. Personally, I think the Home Office is not fit for purpose, and sometimes something is so rotten, it is so incompetent, that actually it's not repairable. It's like a building. Sometimes it's too far gone. You're better to demolish it and rebuild and start again. In my view, the whole of the Border Force, large chunks of the Home Office are responsible for this. It needs completely rebuilding, essentially from the bottom up, by people who want to solve it, who want to get on top of it, want to sort it out on behalf of the British people. And it will save us billions of pounds every single year.
Because, I mean, we've given 120 million quid to Rwanda, of course, for the policy that never got off the ground.
Great deal for Rwanda.
Oh,
they've had the 120 million and no one's rocked up.
Exactly. They must be like the cat that got the cream, Richard, I tell you that much.
And it's just the beginning. But in a sense, that was a sort of a desperate last throw of the dice for the government. And they've been stymied by the European Convention on Human Rights, European Court of Human Rights, which we must, of course, leave. Replicated in British law, fine. But at least we don't have some foreign judge telling us what we can do with our own laws and our own borders. That's absolutely essential in order to do Brexit properly, which you and I believe is the right thing. But what really troubles me about this is they've got all the data.
Yeah.
They know the information, they know where they're departing from, and actually we're just not being told the truth.
And is that because, ultimately, right, Richard, we have all been sold a pup here, right? We have been told that we're helping the world's needy, we're helping war-torn nations, people from war-torn nations. Your heart goes out to them, Richard.
But the reality is, you've got more people coming from Turkey, Vietnam and Egypt. I mean, these are not war zones. Than you've got coming from Yemen and Syria. Syria represents just 5.7% in that 6-week period of this report. So we've properly been sold a pup, properly misled. Billions of pounds of our hard-earned cash are basically going to give profits to the vested interests. And there are huge vested interests here in the UK who are literally racketeering from all of this. The lawyers, the hotel operators, the outsourcers, the charities making big surplus and big wages and all of that. The profits being made in the UK far exceed the profits being made by the vile, hideous people smugglers.
And dare I say, slave labour in some respects, Richard.
And there is, and unfortunately, it is clear, these Albanian criminal gangs, I mean, they are brutal, they are violent, they own hundreds and hundreds of car washes. It turns out there's all of a sudden appearing on high streets up and down the country, Turkish barbers. Very often they're not Turkish. They're Albanian sources of money laundering. This is what's going on in our country, up and down the country. I suspect you may well get many people saying, yeah, it's a bit odd all of a sudden in the last couple of years. A couple of barbers have rocked up when actually there's no one really needing, there's not that demand for it. And you think, I always say, if your gut instinct tells you something, you know something's wrong, but you can't prove it. This report, this leaked report, shows that all of our gut instinct that something was wrong. Always trust your gut, in my view. And that's been proven right. And it's incredibly serious. And I hope that, I'm actually saying, indeed, you may well have listeners and viewers, Darren, who are Conservative members who might be going to a hustings in the next few weeks. Please go, and on behalf of the British people, ask the two leadership candidates, why is it you're allowing 4 in 10 of these migrants to come from a EU applicant, a member of NATO? Why won't you immediately, the same week, say, thank you very much, but you don't qualify, so you're going back to Albania? Here's another stat for you, Darren. Last year, in the middle of the summer, the Home Office, great signing ceremony with Albania saying we're going to return all the 1,500 Albanian prisoners to Albania. 7 months later.
How many?
End of February. Have a guess. 500?
Maybe.
300?
Yeah.
100?
It's lower.
If I told you it's 24, would you be quite surprised and disappointed?
Well, I would say that was ridiculous, yes.
That's the truth. 24, 7 months later. This Home Office is utterly incompetent, utterly woeful. I hate to say it, but I almost think they're actually acting against the interests of the British people. They're not fit for purpose. The whole thing needs real building from the ground up, I think, by a new Home Secretary.
And Richard, if you look at the fact that, as I say, people have voted time and again in various European elections, in general elections, for stronger border controls, do you have any confidence whatsoever that a Labour Party led by Sir Keir Starmer would actually get a grip of this issue?
Are you having me on? I mean, you're having a laugh. I heard you talk earlier about Keir Starmer. I mean, he can't even organise his own administration.
That's true.
His own declarations to Parliament, let alone sort out this crisis. I mean, look, no chance. Nobody thinks that the Labour Party will stop this. The Tories, they talk a good game, but we hear that about so many things. Oh, we're going to grow the economy. Oh, we're going to cut taxes, and then they raise them. You know, I think the British people have had enough of waffle and spin and talk. We want action, and we want it now.
On that point then, were it in my gift, and it's not, of course, it's Her Majesty the Queen's gift, to make you Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Richard, what would Reform UK do immediately? Would you be stripping immigration out of the Home Office, making it its own separate ministry?
Take it straight out, create a new team by people who believe in it, who understand the rules and regulations, and do this three-point plan. So once a month, you put out the data where people are coming from. You make sure that the military assets providing the locations of these departures, you give that to the French, and because then information is power, and you have a pick up and take back policy. And the moment everybody knows that we're deadly, deadly serious about that we're going to take them back to Calais, to Dunkirk, then people will know, right, we mean serious business. There'll be a ruckus around the world for about a week. But then people know that the United Kingdom is not to be messed with.
As, of course, they did with Australia, Richard, right? That's how they got it sorted. But anyway, Richard Tice, thank you very much for bringing us that report. And I dare say it's got a lot of people calling it, emailing in online, Richard. Now, I thank Richard Tice of Reform UK there. Next up, folks, we're going to talk about energy prices rising around the world, and many are starting to actually question the future of our energy supply. The conflict in Ukraine, sanctions on Russia, and an increasingly uncertain world mean that energy self-sufficiency is high on the list of priorities. Now, in this spirit, the government has recently approved the construction of a new nuclear power plant in Suffolk. They hope it'll help Britain diversify its energy sector and bolster our ability to be energy independent. Our East of England reporter Ed Crawford has more.
Britain's going nuclear. This giant dome building along Suffolk's coast is Sizewell B, which generates 3% of the UK's energy, enough to power 2.5 million homes in East Anglia. The government has approved the construction of Sizewell C and hopes that it will give the region as well as the UK's power grid a needed boost. Dwarfing Sizewell B, the new power plant will be almost double the size, and the government hopes it will help the country become more energy self-sufficient. Julia Pike, the financing director for Sizewell C, says she has big hopes.
Well, it's great news for Suffolk because we're working with all the local colleges. We're going to introduce lots and lots more skills training for young people and for adult retrainers. We're going to have 1,500 apprenticeships. We're going to bring thousands of really high quality jobs to Suffolk. And we're going to put around about 4 billion into the regional economy. So it's a fantastic boost.
Energy supplier EDF is behind the project and says it will generate enough low-carbon electricity to supply 6 million homes. It also believes it's a vital step in diversifying the UK's energy sector and reducing the country's dependence on fossil fuels. Ipswich MP Tom Hunt has followed the developments closely.
I support the construction of Sizewell C because locally I can see it providing a lot of jobs and opportunities for people, particularly young people, both during the construction phase and once it's completed. I also support Sizewell C because at the national level it's going to make a significant contribution towards a healthier energy mix for this country, one which promotes energy self-sufficiency and security.
The nuclear option isn't generating enthusiasm for everyone. Alison Downs from Stop Sizewell C has been campaigning for a rethink of the development and is sceptical of the claims it will make the UK self-sufficient.
Sizewell C is neither British nor is it secure. It's going to be developed by a foreign state-owned company that's currently in partnership with a Chinese state-owned company. Sizewell B behind us currently uses enriched uranium fuel from Russia, and that's going to be the case when it refuels next year. So there's a scramble here to find alternative sources of fuel for nuclear energy. And by the time Sizewell C is finally built, if it is built, our energy landscape is going to have been transformed. And I think that future politicians will come to regret investing billions of pounds in a project that is going to take so long to deliver any benefits.
With rising energy prices and a cold winter ahead, the government hopes that by taking the nuclear option now, Sizewell C will be heating Britain's homes and delivering energy security in the years to come. Ed Crawford, GB News.
It's quite the package there. I tell you what, we needed to get on this energy situation years ago. Not now, but there we are. Yous have been emailing in about that interview there with Richard Tice on his report, that leaked report that found that actually the Ministry of Defence know exactly who's coming to this country. 4 in 10 migrants found to be Albanian. And yous are saying, how much are we paying the French government? About 158 million here. Priti Patel recently just gave them a few more million quid. And what for? Yous are asking the question. Robert Hill's got in touch here. He's asking why it is that we're sending millions to the French when we're just ferrying people over the English Channel to come here illegally. It doesn't make sense. And Joe Curtis there says, if 4 out of 10 illegal immigrants are from peaceful Albania, why can't we send them back to their country? They must be economic migrants. And Joe raises a really important and valid point, because as Richard Tice told us, we have a deal with Albania that agreed last summer it would deport 1,500 Albanian prisoners, and only 24 of them actually went. So it strikes me, folks, that the immigration system here is out of control. We are a weak nation on this, folks. But you're watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. I thank you very much. Lots more coming up in the next hour. First, though, here's your latest weather forecast.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK will be mostly dry, although cloudiest in the north with light rain for western Scotland. Here are the details. A fine end to the day across southwest England with plenty of late evening sunshine. It will remain dry throughout this evening and tonight with temperatures only slowly falling away. Across southeast England, clear skies will persist this evening, leaving a fine and dry night, although warm with plenty of sunshine to end the weekend. A dry and fine evening across South Wales, although there may be some patchy low cloud, mist and fog tonight, particularly in the north. There'll be plenty of sunshine around to end the weekend across the Midlands. Tonight, a combination of clear spells and light winds brings a risk of some patchy mist and fog forming. Patchy cloud will persist across much of northeast England this evening, though there will be some late evening sunny spells too, remaining warm this evening and overnight with temperatures only slowly falling away. A mostly dry end to the weekend for southern Scotland with some sunny spells around. However, there may be the odd spot of light rain and drizzle over high ground. Any cloud across Northern Ireland will continue to break up this evening to allow for sunny spells. Clear spells tonight could lead to some patchy rural mist and fog forming though. A largely dry night, though warm, especially in the east. A chance of some mist and fog in the west. That's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us now, this is Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, radio and online. Coming up in this hour with the DIY store Wix becoming the latest to join the trans debate. I don't know why. Your guess is as good as mine. We're going to be breaking down whether or not corporations are becoming too woke. And we'll be speaking to former military intelligence officer Philip Ingram about the social media platform TikTok and asking if it should be banned. Plus, the political commentator Reem Ibrahim will be joining me in the studio throughout the show. All that to come, but first, here's the news with Ray Addison.
Darren, thank you. Coming up to 1 minute past 3, here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The family of Archie Battersby are calling for an inquiry following his death, saying no parent or family must go through this again. The 12-year-old died on Saturday in the Royal London Hospital after weeks of legal battles. Archie had been in a coma since he was found unconscious by his mother at home in April. In a statement, the family say they'd had to fight for Archie's right to live with everything stacked against them. Barts Health NHS Trust issued a statement saying medical staff provided high-quality care to Archie with extraordinary compassion. Rishi Sunak has criticised his leadership rival Liz Truss, describing her planned tax cuts as starry-eyed boosterism compared to his own clear-eyed realism. Writing in The Times, the former Chancellor said putting more borrowed money into the economy risks making inflation worse. Ms Truss says she'll use an emergency budget in September to immediately cut taxes. She's also pledging to bring forward plans to scrap the national insurance hike by 6 months. Former leadership hopeful Penny Mordaunt told GB News Truss is ready to take the reins.
I think she really wants to ensure she's ready to hit the ground running, to have that emergency budget, to alleviate some of the cost of living issues that people are facing, but also to create that modern economic framework that we need to really fire up our economy and get things going again. That's what people want to see, and that's why I've chosen her. I've got a lot of respect for Rishi, but I think that she really understands what the nation needs now.
That's her view. Tory MP and former Education Secretary Damien Hines supports Rishi Sunak for leader. He told GB News he'll introduce more economic support if necessary.
He has been clear that that more help may be needed and can be forthcoming. And it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong to put out of the question. This is about a unique situation that we find ourselves in. Combination of COVID and Putin's aggression in Ukraine, and people are finding it extremely difficult to deal with that.
More than 1,700 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this week. That's more than half the number rescued in the whole of August last year. Yesterday, 337 made the journey from France in 10 small boats. Over 18,000 people have now made the crossing this year, the latest Ministry of Defence figures show. Border Force officials brought the vast majority to shore in Dover. However, many were taken to the port of Ramsgate due to concerns about congestion. Detectives are urging the public to provide any information they may have about the disappearance of missing student nurse Owami Davies. She was last seen in the early hours of the 7th of July as she walked along Derby Road in West Croydon in London. 5 people have now been arrested, 2 on suspicion of murder, 3 on suspicion of kidnap. 4 of the suspects have been released on bail. The Met's Specialist Crime Command says officers are working tirelessly to follow every line of inquiry. Flowers have been left for an 11-year-old girl who died after going missing at a water park in Windsor. Members of the public joined emergency services in the search at Liquid Leisure yesterday afternoon before she was rushed to Wexham Park Hospital. Her death is being treated as unexplained. An investigation is underway. President Zelensky has called for a stronger international response to what he's described as Russia's nuclear terror. It's after Putin's forces shelled the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the biggest in Europe. During a phone call with the European Council President, Zelensky called for sanctions to be imposed on Russia's nuclear industry. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up on this next hour. With the DIY store Wix being the latest to join the trans debate and becoming a Stonewall diversity champion, I'll be raising the question as to whether or not corporations are going too far. Put a sock in it, folks. Should we take any notice to this virtue signalling? And due to the social media app's intrusive terms and conditions and extensive data harvesting methods, potentially posing a major national security risk, should we look again at banning TikTok in Britain? And with alcohol deaths in Scotland on the rise, I'll be asking whether or not the SNP's minimum unit alcohol pricing is actually working. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. As ever, your mouth is much more important than mine. What do you think about corporations getting into woke virtue signalling? Tweet me at GB News or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online on YouTube and don't forget Facebook. Loads of fantastic content on our page. Cheers very much. Go woke, go broke. The DIY chain Wix raised a few eyebrows by displaying this sign emblazoned for my radio listeners with the phrase "No LGB" without the T during an appearance at Brighton Pride, which returned following a 2-year hiatus because, of course, the pandemic. Now, while many praised them for becoming a trans ally and a Stonewall champion, non-trans members of the LGBT community accused Wix of tarring all LGBT people with the same brush and dictating to them who they should align themselves with. Well, joining me to discuss this is the Reverend Calvin Robinson and the LGBTQ activist Peter Tatchell. Peter, I assume you welcomed the intervention of Wix and you probably quite like this kind of entry into the debate.
Well, of course, I think it's great that Wix does affirm its commitment to LGBT plus equality. It makes good business sense. Roughly about 10% of all employees in Britain are lesbian, gay, bisexual or transgender. And it's the interest of businesses that they retain them, that they make those employees feel welcome. We know from the research that's done that where workplaces are welcoming, those employees give extra effort. They are committed to their companies, their productivity is higher, their involvement in the company and their success, contribution towards the success of the company is better. So it does make economic and business sense. And I think it is good that a big company does signal that it doesn't discriminate, that it welcomes everyone. And I think that's something that everyone should be applauding, because discrimination is not compatible with British values.
Calvin Robinson, when I think of Wix, when I think of home improvements, I don't go in there expecting to be discriminated against, right? I go in there seeking home improvement, not a lecture on the latest identity politics crusade.
I know, it's sad. I think Peter's conflating many issues there. He's talking about being welcomed into the workforce, but what Wix is doing here is quite clearly advertising a campaign to their buyers, to the people that are just going in to buy a colour of paint, not necessarily looking for a lecture on societal norms or sexuality. And what I found interesting about the Wix campaign is that it's saying you cannot be in favour or supportive of LGB without being in favour or supportive of the T. And I think that's disingenuous too, because that is discriminatory. If you are in favour of people of all sexualities expressing that sexuality, that has absolutely nothing to do with someone wanting to change gender or changing their sex. That is a debate that is very contested, very hot and heavy right now, has not been settled. And that's so different from the LGB argument of wanting equality in the workforce and in the rest of society.
Yeah, and then Peter, I've told you this before, I'm very grateful to the activism that you've been part of in the past, where you have actually ensured that we have equality in the eyes of the law and wider society as far as gay men and women are concerned, and bisexual men and women. But I'm wondering, how does the issue of gender dysphoria, of someone saying, look, I have gender dysphoria, it's a very debilitating thing to experience, my heart goes out to people that are genuinely experiencing that. But, Peter, I don't understand how the T is the same as the LGB, because one's sexual orientation and another is a gender dysphoria, a real issue that needs to be addressed.
In fact, that's quite dangerous, because it's mixing up a mental health issue with a sexuality.
Well, there is a difference between lesbian, gay and bisexual and trans. One is about sexual orientation, the other is about gender identity, but both experience very similar, or have historically experienced very similar levels of discrimination and hate crime. Now, lesbian, gay and bisexual people have made huge advances. Trans people have somewhat been left behind. And I think we just, as a gesture of solidarity, we want to support our trans siblings. And again, going back to the business argument, there will be employees in Wix who are trans. There will be customers of Wix who are trans. Obviously, the business wants to make them all feel welcome. And that's just common sense. It's not saying that people should endorse it. It's just saying that they, as a company, endorse the principle of inclusion and equality for LGBT people. And that includes, of course, the T. They're saying they don't want to exclude trans people. I think that's a lovely, warm-hearted, generous, kind message. I'm all in favor of loving others, supporting others, ending discrimination. I don't want to see discrimination against trans people. We know they do suffer prejudice and discrimination. I think it's fantastic that a company says, we don't support discrimination.
But Peter, the trans movement is actually discriminatory towards women and women's rights. And this is why it's such a hot, contested issue at the moment, because people are fighting to protect women's spaces, female-only spaces. And this is, therefore, a political statement by Wix. It's not inclusion, it's not diversity, it's a political statement that is going to put a lot of people off. So I don't think it does make financial sense, actually. I think it's actually counterproductive to their business. It's a social lecture, it's social justice warrior, and it's been taken up by the LGBT plus movement within Wix. It's not actually by the corporate body.
And Peter, before you answer that, I'm just wondering, the other banner that Wix had on their float there was they're looking to ban all forms of what they call conversion therapy. Now, this would actually stop someone like Calvin in his ministry from having a conversation with somebody about issues like gender identity and other forms of conversation, frankly, of prayer, of all of these other things. Do you support that as someone who believes passionately in freedom of speech?
Well, the proposed legislation would not ban conversations. It would ban attempts to change someone's sexual orientation or their gender identity. And that, we know, according to all the medical, psychiatric and counselling organisations, is very, very harmful. It's not only unethical, it's not only damaging, it doesn't work, but it does cause the victims immense psychological and emotional damage. We know that the rates of self-harm, depression, and anxiety among people who've been subjected to conversion therapy is astronomically high. I had a friend who went through conversion therapy some years ago. It made him suicidal. Now he can't even have a functioning relationship, emotionally or sexually. It's caused him that much damage. And that's why all the professional bodies say it is unethical, dangerous, and wrong.
I mean, I can't argue against your personal anecdote, which is probably why you used it. But what you said about all psychologists and all professional bodies saying that this is actually incorrect, because what we're seeing is a lot of companies are saying if you ban conversion therapy under the current legislation, it will prevent many, many therapists and pastors and priests from having genuine conversations with people who are exploring themselves and their identity, not about turning people away from becoming trans if that's what they want, but about having an engaging conversation and helping and supporting and encouraging people where necessary. People will be put off from that because there will be lawsuits. Therapists will no longer be able to have conversations that are open and honest, therefore they'll stop taking on board clients. And priests and vicars and deacons like myself will not be able to have conversations with people because we'll be under threat of prosecution from simply sitting down and talking with them. It's disingenuous to say that that's not the case. And I don't see what the point of it is, because all we're hearing so far is we're trying to stop persecution, we're trying to stop oppression. The LGBT plus community is not oppressed. In fact, as a straight man, I feel more oppressed than most of my gay friends at the moment, because Pride Day became Pride Month. Pride Month is in, June? We're now in August. Pride is still going on in London as you walk about. Everywhere you go is overly affirming the LGBT community. Everywhere you go, it's no longer oppressed. It's now, we've overreached. There was a fight for equality, which was important, I'll grant you that, but we've gone past that. There was no criteria to say, when we've met this, what do we do next?
Peter Tatchell.
Kelvin, you are factually wrong. Even today, 1/3 of all LGBT plus people in this country have been victims of hate crime because of their sexuality or gender identity. That's 1/3, nearly 1 million people. I have friends of mine who have been beaten up just on the eve of the London Pride at the beginning of the month, at the beginning of July. 2 friends of mine were beaten up by thugs as they left a gay club in South London. When it comes to our schools, nearly half of all LGBT plus kids in our schools have been victims of bullying, again, because of their sexuality or gender identity. So to say that it's all over and we've won this battle, we have made great.
The battle for equality is over. Because
and to say that we're not, there is still
what you do, Peter, is you very cleverly mix up stats. The vast majority of young people have been bullied in school for any reason: sex, sexuality, gender, race, whatever. Kids are bullied, and that's something we need to work on and stamp out, absolutely. But to conflate those facts and to use those facts to your argument to suggest that there is still a fight for equality is wrong. What kind of equality under the law do you not have as an LGBTQ++ person in this country?
Well, for example, under the equality laws, religious organisations, including faith-run schools, hospitals, shelters for the homeless, are allowed in certain circumstances to discriminate against LGBT plus people. That is written into our equality laws. Why should faith
So are you
organisations...
saying that people should not be able to adhere to their faith? Because in my faith, marriage is between one man and one woman united under God. And that is a discrimination under law that is protected because it's part of the faith. Are you saying we should undermine faith in this country and say that actually you're no longer allowed to practice Christianity, Islam, Hinduism and Judaism?
This is not about faith organisations. It's not about faith organisations. A church-run hostel for homeless people or a church-run nursing home is allowed.
In what way would a nursing home or a hostel discriminate against someone?
Let me finish, please. In certain circumstances, they are allowed to refuse to care for an LGBT plus person. That is written into the law. It's not about faith organisations practicing their faith. It's about faith-run schools.
I'm sorry, but that is absolute nonsense. No care facility in this country is allowed to discriminate on someone due to their immutable characteristics. We have laws to protect against that. The Equalities Act is one of them.
And written into it says there are qualified exemptions for religious organisations.
OK, we'll disagree on that one. But I wonder, Peter, I want to ask you about this revelation by Guido Fawkes, the political blog, that found that HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, is spending over £1 million a year on taxpayers' money on diversity and inclusion officers. I'm wondering, Peter, a lot of my audience are saying, well, hang on a minute, Darren, we're in a generation-defining cost of living crisis, inflation like you wouldn't believe. Is this really the right use of taxpayer cash? What say you, Peter?
Well, £1 million out of the HMRC budget is very, very, very tiny. And again, the purpose is to overcome historic discriminations and disadvantages that certain groups face. And I think everybody who wants a kinder, gentler society should welcome that. We want to get to a situation where we won't need to spend this money, where everyone will feel welcome and included, where everyone will be treated equally, where historic disadvantage will be overcome. That's the purpose of this kind of spending. And it is really very, very tiny considering the large and massive HMRC budget.
So, Calvin Robinson, are these diversity and inclusion managers, that £1 million, is that a good use of taxpayer cash?
Absolutely not. It's a complete waste of our money. £3 million been spent since 2019 on these people that are just splashing it around, painting rainbows here, there and everywhere. And it's not about making people feel more welcome at all. When your entire department is almost pressured into putting their pronouns on their email signatures, as just a lame example, the people that don't want to say what their pronouns are because they think they're obvious and everyone could see their pronouns by their name or by knowing them, then they feel left out. They don't feel welcome. So what we're doing is we're flipping the whole thing around. We're not making people more welcome. We're making one demographic more welcome than others. And that is not equality. That is not diversity, and it's not inclusion.
Calvin, I just want to ask you about
anybody being forced to use pronouns. That
As I said,
wrong.
pressured. I didn't say forced. Don't twist my words. I said if you pressure a whole group of people to use pronouns, the ones that don't want to use them are going to feel like they're doing something wrong. And you know that to be the case.
Well, as I said, I don't support anyone being forced or pressured. It should be optional.
But that's what these programs do. Unconscious bias training is another example that has been debunked, does not work. A lot of this money from diversity and inclusion and equality officers goes on to giving people unconscious bias training, telling people that they're either overtly racist or covertly racist. These things that they cannot overcome. It's just the way that they're born if they happen to be white. These are harmful, divisive, toxic ideologies that should be nowhere near any public body. And the fact that you and I are paying good money to make it happen is disgusting.
Peter Tatchell, final brief word.
In most cases. I would oppose it. I don't think it does happen in most cases. But I'm sure there are some examples. And, we do have to create a culture of equality and inclusion in a way that doesn't exclude people or make people feel bad about themselves. This is not about revenge. It's not about making people feel guilty. It's about making people feel embracing and inclusive of others so that we can all live together in a harmonious, kind and gentle society.
OK, we'll have to leave it there, folks, and agree to disagree. That was the Reverend Calvin Robinson and the LGBTQ activist Peter Tatchell. I thank both of them for their contribution. Now, folks, there's plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. After the break, I'll continue that discussion with the political commentator Reem Ibrahim. But what do you think at home? Are corporations becoming too woke? Let's have a little look at the weather before we get back.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK will be mostly dry, although cloudiest in the north with light rain for western Scotland. Here are the details. A fine end to the day across southwest England with plenty of late evening sunshine. It will remain dry throughout this evening and tonight with temperatures only slowly falling away. Across southeast England, clear skies will persist this evening, leaving a fine and dry night, although warm with plenty of sunshine to end the weekend. A dry and fine evening across South Wales, although there may be some patchy low cloud, mist and fog tonight, particularly in the north. There'll be plenty of sunshine around to end the weekend across the Midlands. Tonight, a combination of clear spells and light winds brings a risk of some patchy mist and fog forming. Patchy cloud will persist across much of northeast England this evening, though there will be some late evening sunny spells too, remaining warm this evening and overnight with temperatures only slowly falling away. A mostly dry end to the weekend for southern Scotland with some sunny spells around. However, There may be the odd spot of light rain and drizzle over high ground. Any cloud across Northern Ireland will continue to break up this evening to allow for sunny spells. Clear spells tonight could lead to some patchy rural mist and fog forming though. A largely dry night though warm, especially in the east. A chance of some mist and fog in the west. That's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Now, joining me live in the studio is the political commentator, Reem Ibrahim. Reem, you listened to that debate between Calvin Robinson and Peter Tatchell. I wonder, do you think, as someone that believes in market competition and the freedom and right of individuals to express themselves however they want, are corporations trying to ram values down our throats?
Well, my first point is that actually I think private companies are able to do whatever it is that they wish to do. The reason why I find Wix slightly funny is because I think that most of their customers tend to be blue-collar workers. So to think that they're sort of shopping at a place that is sort of pushing these ideas, I think is quite funny. Yeah, my view is that private companies are always free to be able to say whatever it is that they want to do. The flip side of that is actually they're pushing for legislation and change. They're pushing for the ban on conversion therapy. And I think that that's a slightly different issue. They're not just a private company advocating for LGBTQ rights. They are advocating for changing legislation. And that's where the issue really lies.
And absolutely, because I mean, I don't know what your view is, but my view is that we must not legislate to ban conversations between a therapist, a healthcare professional, and potentially a child who is saying they're experiencing gender dysphoria and could lead on a medical pathway, for example.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more with you, Darren. I think that the core of the issue is here that we are trying to implement a restriction on freedom of speech. We're telling doctors and nurses that they can't have that simple conversation with children. I think when we're talking about medical change, this is where it's really, really quite important. I mean, we saw with the closure of the Tavistock Centre recently, the absolutely appalling things that we're hearing from those doctors that felt too afraid to tell the children and tell the parents of the children that actually medical transition, permanent medical transition, is actually not the right way forward for them. And now we're seeing more and more people detransitioning. I think it really is a lack of sort of empathy for these children. They were too afraid to be, and were afraid to be called transphobic. I think this is a real huge restriction on freedom of speech.
And then, so my viewers will broadly, I think, agree with you. That will be the consensus. And they'll be saying, well, hang on a minute. If I want to go into Wickes and buy some bits and bobs for home improvement, I don't need a lecture on transgender identity, right? Just leave the politics out of it.
I do agree with you on that point, but I also do think that we vote with our dollar as consumers.
Well,
if you don't want to go to Wickes and you don't want a lecture on transitioning and LGBTQ rights, go to B&Q. As a consumer, you can choose and you can make those decisions. Wickes is a private company; they have the freedom to do that.
Rami Ibrahim, the political commentator. I wonder how many people will be taking up that advice. Now, folks, moving on. Several parts of England have been hit with a hosepipe ban after the driest July for 87 years. People living in Kent, Sussex, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight are all prohibited from using hosepipes to water their gardens, clean their cars and fill paddling pools. However, the ban is being questioned by Water UK, who say that hosepipe bans normally only reduces water usage by around 10%. Well, joining me to discuss these measures is the Conservative MP for Wokingham, Sir John Redwood. John Redwood, I thank you very much for your time. Do you welcome this hosepipe ban? Do you think it's the right measure to conserve water at this time?
No, I do not welcome bans. I want them to put in enough capacity so they can meet the legitimate demands of their consumers. But if they judge that we won't get through this summer and next winter without a hosepipe ban, they should get on with it immediately to make sure we don't run out. They have to make that decision. They know the normal patterns of demand and they know how much water they've got left. I've been one of those MPs urging them for several years to put in more capacity. We've been building all these houses and welcoming hundreds of thousands of new people into the southeast, and we haven't been putting in the extra capacity you obviously need if you welcome a lot more people into a lot of new homes.
John Redwood, if we accept that climate change and the world getting hotter and all the rest of it, we accept that this summer will not be a unique one-off test subject. In that case, John Redwood, do we have to learn to live with this? And that means we also have to ensure that the water supply, diminished as it is right now, is kept constant. How do we actually manage the effects of climate change?
When you put in capacity, I mean, if you really think it's going to get hotter and we're going to have less rain, and we're obviously having a period without a lot of rain at the moment. We had a very big one in 1976 when we did run out of water and had to put in standpipes. In order to stop that kind of thing, the answer is terribly easy. You put in more capacity. And the great news is that there's loads of water all around the globe. The globe is more water than anything else with all the oceans. And some of that water is picked up, forms clouds, and is dropped as rain. We've got to collect more of it, clean more of it, make sure it is available for supply. But you can't destroy water. It goes through a water cycle. It's the ultimate renewable. It just requires the regulators and the industry to get their act together to have enough of it on standby for when you don't have much rain.
So in the interim then, whilst the water companies get on with doing that, hopefully, we'd all, I think, agree with that sentiment. What do you actually think about the encouragement by some water companies to encourage their customers to snitch on those who defy the ban?
Well, they will have their own views of what they should say to their customers. I'm not here to give them advice on how to manage their customer accounts or what messages to send out. I do want the water companies to concentrate on doing their jobs, which is to have enough clean water available and to stop tipping sewage into our rivers, two very essential things that you would have thought the regulator by now would be on top of. And when it comes to making those crucial judgments about whether we need to rein in our water consumption already and not use hoses, we need some factual information from them about what their stocks are like and what they think is going to happen next. And it would be a good idea, if they really are worried, to put the hosepipes bans on as quickly as possible.
So, John, you won't be giving the Jaguar a hose down anytime soon then, I assume?
I am not in an area which has banned hosepipes yet, and I will make my own judgment about what is appropriate to do. But I don't waste water. It is, after all metered.
Yes, absolutely. I'm wondering then, is this sort of thing going to become more common? Because the water companies don't seem to be acting fast enough. As you say, you're calling for action there, robust action to ensure the supply of water and to clean the stuff and get it out there a lot faster than they are right now. Do you see this becoming more regular, that the hosepipe bans just become something that we experience in this country and get used to?
Well, they only need to. I mean, we're told that Thames Water can't make available its desalination plant at the moment. Well, why not? We've got a dry patch in this summer. Surely that's what they put in all that capital investment to a desalination plant in order to protect them against it. And London is one of the very drought-ridden parts of the country with a very big population. It'd be really good if they could just turn on their desalination plant. And I'm very happy to support in a suitable location in the southeast a new reservoir. We've been talking about that for years, but still no sign of it.
Well, John Redwood MP, always the home of common sense. I thank you very much for your contribution there on water companies needing to get their act together, folks. Now, you're with GB News on telly and radio. Coming up, I'll be talking to the former military intelligence officer, Philip Ingram, about the social media platform TikTok. From its extensive data harvesting methods to why Parliament's decided to shut their account down after just a week of it launching. That's next after the news headlines with Ray Addison.
Fast approaching 3:35. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The family of Archie Battersby are calling for an inquiry following his death, saying no parent or family must go through this again. The 12-year-old died on Saturday in the Royal London Hospital after weeks of legal battles. In a statement, the family said they'd had to fight for Archie's right to live with everything stacked against them. Barts Health NHS Trust has issued a statement saying medical staff had provided high-quality care with extraordinary compassion. The Environment Secretary is urging water companies to ban the use of hose pipes as forecasters predict dry weather for most of the UK next week. George Eustace says some firms have rightly taken action to lessen the effects of an unusually dry August, and he's encouraging others to do the same. Last week, Southern Water and South East Water imposed bans for their customers. Taiwan's military says it has detected 66 Chinese Air Force planes and 14 Chinese warships conducting drills within the Taiwan Strait today. 4 days of drills by China were finally due to end, but China has since threatened to conduct more of these kind regularly. It follows a visit to Taiwan by US House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Israeli and Palestinian fighters have agreed a truce from this evening following 3 days of violence. Egyptian negotiators have been liaising with both sides to de-escalate. The region has seen shelling from both sides in recent days following a strike by Israeli forces on Friday against jihadist militants. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Darren will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, if you watch this show, you'll know I've got a bee in my bonnet for government failure. And could this be one of them? Just a week after launch and Parliament has shut down its TikTok account after numerous MPs said, hang on a minute, I've got concerns around data security. The account went live on the 27th of July with the promise of offering TikTok users behind-the-scenes content of what goes on in Parliament. But it's since been locked and had its content deleted after several senior Tory MPs, including Tom Tugendhat, leadership contender at one point, wrote to the speakers of both the House of Commons and the House of Lords, urging them to take their account down. Well, joining me to discuss this is the former senior military intelligence officer, Philip Ingram. Philip, I thank you very much for your time. Do you agree that a parliamentary TikTok account poses a risk to our national security?
A massive risk. TikTok has got a huge number of concerns around it. I'll never have it on any of my devices unless it's a burner device that's used just for apps that I think are suspicious. It has been accused of, and it's been proven that it carries out excessive data collection operations on data that it doesn't need. And this is the trouble with viral apps that are out there, that people don't know what's going on in the background of them. And TikTok itself, through the company that developed it, ByteDance, has got very close links to the Chinese government.
Philip Ingram, I wonder then, is it just because of the fact that behind the scenes, based in Beijing and all of these other things, do we have question marks around TikTok as a platform because of its links to China and the Chinese Communist Party? Or is it that this app is unethical in its harvesting of our data?
Well, I think both come into it. I think it's unethical in the amount of data that it's harvesting. It's not policing the practices of what it's encouraging people to do to get their little videos up on TikTok. A lot of those videos, and we look at the number of videos that are coming out of the conflict in Ukraine, for example. TikTok can geo-reference them. It can look at more data on the devices that are being used to upload the videos and everything else. What's happening to that data? Is it being passed to one side or to the other side? And all of that happens with our personal data as well. And that is put into what's called big data, and it can be then used to try and manipulate the messages that we're seeing on other social media platforms and try and influence the way we think. This is something that came out in the wider Cambridge Analytica scandal linked to Facebook, but TikTok is at the center of it. And we should be really concerned about every app that we have on all of our devices, because we need to know how it's handling our data.
And the senior Tory MP, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, he's in the Telegraph saying, and I quote, "Others need to think twice about opening accounts with TikTok. They're harvesters for the Chinese government." I mean, when you read statements like that, you think, my word, this app is enormously popular, enormously successful. I've got Reem Ibrahim here in the studio who uses it to her heart's content, right? Should we actually be saying, hang on a minute, we need a nationwide ban on this platform?
The difficulty is we live in a nation where free speech is at the core of what we do. So we can't ban free speech, but we have to let people know the threats that are out there. So your colleague who's got the TikTok, if she's happy that every single one of her contacts, every single draft text that she produces, potentially every email that she's got, potentially every picture that she's got on her device goes into a Chinese government intelligence database and can be used against her or against her contacts. If she's happy with that, provided she knows it, then that's fine. It's her choice to use it. But people need to realize and wake up to the threat. It is very real. And if I was to devise a perfect intelligence gathering tool as a former senior intelligence officer where I wanted to get stuff easily, I'd devise something that is viral, that is popular for people to use, that they're going to put stuff on, but I can harvest everything else that's going on behind it. That's what TikTok does.
Philip, how much do you agree with me then that actually we were sleepwalking to this idea that China was joining the international order, that it would become a liberal democracy thanks to the marketisation of basically it's adopting capitalism to a certain extent, and actually this idea that it would become a good actor, a fair actor on the international stage? Well, COVID blew that theory out of the water completely, didn't it, when it refused to actually share data on this pandemic with nations like our own. How much do you reckon that the West is sleepwalking into disaster with the Chinese Communist Party ultimately reaping the spoils of our stupidity?
Oh, completely. China it thinks and plans and acts 25 years ahead. So whenever it's doing anything, it takes little steps, little bites. It moves very slowly, doing things to a much longer term plan that we don't notice in our rushing around every day, where the most important thing politically is what tomorrow morning's headline is going to be or what the next tweet is going to be in half an hour's time. Whereas China doesn't care about that. It ignores the headlines. It ignores everything else. And it moves slowly, slowly, slowly. And if we look at where it's got pervasive throughout the whole of society, what it's doing in Southeast Asia, in growing new land masses that it's claiming, in the threats that it's putting out to Taiwan, in the military capabilities building, is building more ships every year than the Royal Navy's got in its fleet today. We're missing all of that. So yes, we are sleepwalking into a potential huge issue in the future.
Philip Ingram, I guess the most depressing question I can think of that I must end with then would be, as a senior military intelligence, a former senior military intelligence officer, do you reckon we all better start learning our Mandarin? Do you reckon actually, we're basically, that's it, we might as well accept that President Xi is going to be our head of state and not Her Majesty the Queen?
I don't think we're anywhere near that stage. I think China's got a number of weaknesses, and that's the reason why China's sitting on the fence and not supporting Russia openly. Economics drives everything. So China doesn't want to go to war, doesn't want to have conflict with people. It wants to take over the world economically, and it already owns most of Africa, a big chunk of Southeast Asia, is developing into Europe, owns all the mines in Australia. It's working very slowly, but we have to wake up and recognise the threat, and people have to realise that a lot of stuff that's out there that they think is convenient, they think is nice, they think is everything else, is actually helping the threat actors develop and realise this and not just forget about it.
Okay, well, Philip Ingram there, I thank you very much for your expertise on that issue. Joining me live in the studio is TikTok star herself, political commentator Reem Ibrahim.
Hello.
Reem, you heard the question that Philip Ingram said there. He put that directly to you. He said, if you're happy for your data to be harvested, potentially your pictures on your phone being harvested by a company that will have links to the Chinese state, what say you?
Look, I think that TikTok is not just a dancing app. It's not just an app that we use to create funny videos. A lot of our data security is at risk across different apps that we use. I think that there's been huge data risks with things like Snapchat, things like Instagram and Twitter. So a lot of our data is already out there. I actually think that our data is at risk regardless of whether we use TikTok or not. I completely agree with Philip. I think that TikTok is a particular issue, primarily because of obviously its links with the CCP as well. But again, I think that government will always try and access our data across all the apps that we use. And TikTok is a particularly effective app when it comes to its algorithm. I mean, loads of the frontbench MPs also use TikTok in order to sort of campaign, show what they do as a member of parliament. So I think that some of them are maybe a little bit hypocritical asking for the parliamentary TikTok to go as well. I mean, Nadine Dorries herself follows me on TikTok, so...
Well, do you think the solution, speaking of Nadine Dorries, and just briefly if you would, do you think the solution here is an online safety bill that actually ensures that the likes of Archie Battersby apparently took part, he could well have taken part in one of those viral trends that has ultimately led him to hurt himself and ultimately end in his death? Do we need an online safety bill to actually protect kids from these viral trends on TikTok?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's really, really quite sad what a lot of people will try and do online. I think it's up to the parents' responsibility to protect their children. And the online safety bill is absolutely awful. I really hope that the government do end up scrapping it after we'll see what happens after the leadership election. It's an indictment on free speech.
You want to be careful because Nadine Dorries will be unfollowing you on TikTok if you're not careful. Now, folks, it's time for Grime Watch, a chance to look at what you at home have been saying about the biggest stories of the week. In light of the findings that Sir Keir Starmer had breached MP's code of conduct, I said this on social media. Sir Keir Starmer QC has been found to have breached the MP's code of conduct by failing to register on time 8 interests. 8. Once you can be forgiven, twice maybe, but 8 interests. Were this Boris Johnson, would never hear the end of it. It would be headline news. And I stand by that, it won't surprise you to learn. And a lot of you have been responding to it, and Marie has this to say. For a swanky lawyer, he sure does appear to have issues with completing paperwork. And that's it, Marie. I tell you what, if it was Boris Johnson, if the shoe was on the other foot, it would be front page of The Guardian. Sue says, Mr. Forensic doesn't seem very forensic on his paperwork, does he? Even more double standards stacked in favour of the Labour Party. Oh, doesn't hold back there, Sue. But Abu disagrees. Sir Keir Starmer was found not to have deliberately withheld this information, unlike Boris Johnson, who didn't know he was paying for his flat renovation until it was found to be Tory donors. And Richard goes on to poke fun at Beergate. Sir Keir Starmer must think that his free exemption from Durham covers Westminster as well. Well, Lloyd has this to offer. On the scale of things, this does not even register on the scale compared to the Tories. Everything is relative. If we can forgive the Tories for their indiscretions, then we can completely ignore this. Well, I wonder if the electorate will agree with Lloyd there, but Matthew finally says, Mr. Squeaky Clean is not so clean after all. I think the only squeakiness with Sir Keir Starmer is the fact that he's so robotic. He needs a bit of oil, doesn't he? But I thank you all for your thoughts, much more important than mine. Now, the number of deaths in Scotland caused by alcohol is at its highest level since 2008. The statistics were particularly worrying for Scots living in certain areas, as deaths attributed to alcohol were over 5 times as likely in the most deprived settings. Not only that, alcohol-related hospital stays were nearly 8 times higher. So is minimum unit alcohol pricing actually working? Favourite project of the pet project of the SNP? Well, joining me to discuss this is the Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Christopher Snowden. Christopher, look, for those of us who don't know, what actually is minimum unit pricing, and when was it introduced in Scotland? Has it had enough time to actually feed through and have an effect?
Minimum pricing came in May 2018. It just sets a floor price on a unit of alcohol. Unit of alcohol is, for example, 1 shot of whiskey or half a pint of beer. So you cannot, in Scotland, sell alcohol at less than 50p per unit. This has led to a significant price rises, particularly for things like cider. But for most alcohol sold in off-licenses and supermarkets, the price has gone up in the last 4 years. So yes, it's had plenty of time to show its merits. There was a lot of modelling saying it was going to reduce crime, it was going to reduce unemployment, reduce alcohol-related hospital admissions and deaths. So far, all we've seen is a relatively modest drop in alcohol consumption, but not amongst the heaviest drinkers. A study came out a few weeks ago showing that the heaviest drinkers are actually drinking more. We've had studies out showing that it's had no effect on crime, that it's had no effect on A&E attendances. And as you say there, we've seen alcohol-related deaths go up for the last 2 years. Most of that probably down to COVID and to the lockdowns, the stress and boredom and so on, anxiety associated with the pandemic. We've seen a similar phenomenon in England, but we don't really need to look at that data to show that minimum pricing hasn't worked. We've got plenty of evaluations in other areas.
Minimum pricing then, how much more expensive did it make alcohol for those that aren't in Scotland?
For those who aren't in Scotland, it had no effect. I mean, that's why we can use England as a control group. But
that haven't experienced it.
It depends on what you were drinking, really. So if you look at like white cider, very cheap industrial white cider, essentially that's been taken off the market pretty much in Scotland. There's really no point buying it. It went up by several pounds per bottle. So what it really meant, it was quite interesting from an economic point of view, because people who were heavy dependent drinkers were drinking things like white cider just because they were cheap. It wasn't because they particularly liked the flavour of it or anything. So you've seen huge decline in cider sales. You've seen a big increase in fortified wine sales, including Buckfast, which has a bit of reputation in Scotland as being associated with alcohol disorder. But what it's meant is that if you were previously drinking the stuff that was below 50p a unit, you now can base your preferences on things like how quickly is this going to get me drunk, in which case you might switch to spirits, or do I like the flavour, in which case you might go to something like fortified wine, or who knows, with brandy or whatever. But the overall effect, although you've seen declines in some areas and rises in other areas, you have seen this decline of about 5% in overall alcohol consumption, which a lot of people would assume would lead to a reduction in alcohol-related deaths and other problems associated with alcohol, but it hasn't.
All we've done is actually raise the price of alcohol and impact disproportionately the least well off. Because, Chris, most of us aren't, and I dare say this is the case in Scotland as well, most people aren't problem drinkers. So is it really right to harm everyone in their pockets just to combat this issue when it isn't even combating that issue, Chris, evidently?
Well, especially when it's not actually combating the issue. Obviously, if policy isn't working, then it doesn't make sense to bring it in at all. But I did some research on this a few months ago and estimated that the policy has cost drinkers £270 million in Scotland already. So It's having a real effect on the cost of living. And really what's happened is what I think most people without any kind of academic qualifications could probably work out. There was a study came out last week showing people are spending less money on food in Scotland. Now, you might think that's quite a good thing because Scotland has an obesity problem, same as most of the Western world. But they're not consuming less junk food. In fact, they're consuming more on average, more crisps and snacks and less fruit and veg. So it's having all sorts of bad unintended consequences. And as another study in June pointed out, the people who are heavy or dependent drinkers, they're still drinking just as much. Some of them are drinking more. They're going to the pub less, some of them, which is something I thought would probably happen. They're spending less in other areas, including food and perhaps heating. And some of them, in some cases, are resorting to food banks. But the one thing they're not doing is cutting down their alcohol consumption.
Yeah, well, there we are. And that answers the question, doesn't it? If the policy ain't working, get rid of it. That was the head of lifestyle economics there, Christopher Snowden. I thank you for your time. Now, folks, you've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. I thank you very much for your company. This show's on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 o'clock, and we always value your opinion more than mine. But for now, folks, I'm going to leave you with the weather. Hopefully, it's going to be nice all weekend, and we won't have any more of those pesky hosepipe bans, though, as well, that John Redwood addressed earlier on the show.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK will be mostly dry, although cloudiest in the north with light rain for western Scotland. Here are the details. A fine end to the day across southwest England with plenty of late evening sunshine. It will remain dry throughout this evening and tonight with temperatures only slowly falling away. Across southeast England, clear skies will persist this evening, leaving a fine and dry night, although warm with plenty of sunshine to end the weekend. A dry and fine evening across South Wales, although there may be some patchy low cloud, mist and fog tonight, particularly in the north. there'll be plenty of sunshine around to end the weekend across the Midlands. Tonight, a combination of clear spells and light winds brings a risk of some patchy mist and fog forming. Patchy cloud will persist across much of northeast England this evening, though there will be some late evening sunny spells too, remaining warm this evening and overnight with temperatures only slowly falling away. A mostly dry end to the weekend for southern Scotland with some sun